All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. We are continuing in Mesillas Yesharim in Perek Yud Aleph, the 11th chapter of Mesillas Yesharim, and we are continuing today being Wednesday, the 29th of Cheshvan, the 23rd of November, beginning with the section of Chachamenu Zichronam. So remember again, the Ramchal was speaking about the negativity of MS, the positivity of MS, the challenge of sheker, challenge of falsehood, and ultimately trying to understand how often we spoke about our three different categories of shakranim, three different categories of lies. What page is it in the art scroll?
220 at the bottom.
220 at the bottom. If you look by the way on the Hachzek calendar, you'll see it has, it's small, but it has both in this red version of the Mesillas Yesharim and in the art scroll exactly where we begin each day. So 220 on the bottom. So the Ramchal writes, Chacham Zichron Livracha Amru. Chazal said, Chosam shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu MS. And this is an incredibly profound idea that literally the Chosam, which means the signet of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is MS. Which Rabbi Say tells you, Ubevadai Shema MS Huma Shebachar Bo HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kakto L'Chosam Lo. So we'll say, what does that mean that Chosam shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu MS? Like Kiviyachol, the signature of Hashem is MS. Right? So your signet, right? When the days of a signet ring, right? So your signet, that represented your identity. So the idea over here that Chazal are expressing is the core identity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is MS, is truth. And therefore says Ramchal, if at the end of the day, that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose as his signet, Kamayiyah hefcho mituav lefanov, how abominable the opposite of MS must be to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So if MS is the signet of Hashem, what that tells us is that Lamaisa, MS represents the core identity of the Ribono Shel Olam, which means that when a person engages in sheker, in falsehood, which is the antithesis of MS, how repulsive that must be to the Ribono Shel Olam. Incredible. HaKadosh Baruch Hu ala MS ashara rabba. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has spoken to us, has warned us about the need to maintain an MS-tic life in so many different ways. As the pasuk says, Dabru MS ish esrei ehu. Pasuk in Zechariah, literally a person is to speak truth to his fellow. Va'amar, v'huchan b'chesed kiseh, v'yashav alav b'emes. Va'amar, v'yomer achamihim abanim lo yishakeru. Halamarta shezeh taloi bazeh. The Ramchal ultimately teaches us, and the pasuk teaches us, that in order to be called children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and in order to maintain a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, one must deal constantly and consistently in the midah of MS. Va'amar, v'nikra Yerushalayim ir ha'emes lahagdil chashivusa. Again, Yerushalayim itself is called the city of truth. Out of all the things you could call Yerushalayim, why call it the city of truth? So Ramchal posits, it's in order, because remember, if MS is the signet of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, MS is the core feature of the Ribono Shel Olam, calling Yerushalayim Ir HaEmes, the city of truth, means that Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh is the closest city to the Ribono Shel Olam. Ukvar Amru Zichron Livracha, the Dover MS Bilavaval, Kigon Rav Safra. So the Ramchal here quotes the pasuk in David HaMelech writes about Dover MS Bilavaval, which also, if you think about it, is a strange expression, right? Dover MS Bilavaval means he speaks truth in his heart. Well, you don't speak truth in your heart, right? You speak truth with your lips. You could feel truth in your heart. So the Gemara talks about Kigon Rav Safra, like the story of Rav Safra. That I both say the story of Rav Safra, which is the Gemara Mesillas Makos, is an incredible story. So what happened? The Gemara tells very quickly, Rav Safra had an object that he wanted to sell. And someone approached him to go ahead and purchase the particular object. And the Gemara says that he was in the middle of Kriyas Shema. So the guy puts out a purchase price. Rav Safra doesn't go ahead and answer. So the buyer assumes that Rav Safra is holding out for a higher price. Well, to make a very long story short, the price starts going up and up and up to the point until Rav Safra finishes Shema. Now, at that point, Rav Safra could have easily accepted the higher price. After all, again, essentially the guy was bidding against himself. So he went ahead and he raised the price. But instead what Rav Safra said was, look, my kavanah, my intention was to sell the object for the much lower price. You mistook my silence as raising the price, but that was never my intention. Shabbos say, so this is an example of Dover Emes Bilavavel. Someone who speaks the truth. Again, no one would have ever known what Rav Safra's real intention was. And by the way, I think any of us could have made the most incredible excuse for accepting. We'll say, come on, think about this just a moment. Rav Safra is saying Shema, and the purchaser is bidding against himself, driving up the price. If it was me, I would have said, it's clear that the Ribono Shel Olam wants me to have this extra money. It would be an avera not to take it. It would be a lack of emunah in Hashem. Hashem provides for everyone. He wants me to have the greater amount of money. Now the truth is, maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu did want Rav Safra to have the greater amount of money. But at the end of Rav Safra valued MS over everything else. So MS says, I stood prepared to sell the item for X. I'm not going to take advantage of the situation and sell it for Y. Now I will say, it's interesting because whether or not like halachically, Rav Safra was correct, in other words, could he have accepted the extra money, is a different discussion. But we're not getting into that because there's a level of MS that transcends din. Right? Din, right? Halacha says mutter aser. Would it have been mutter for Rav Safra to accept a higher amount of money? Of course. Absolutely mutter. But the point of it that's being expressed over here is there's mutter and there's MS. And sometimes what MS says is, even though it's correct, I'm not going to do it because it's not true. It's not true. A valuing of MS above, and we'll say, is this not one of the hardest things? Because at the end of the day, so often we run into this in life, and the truth is for many of us, I'm content if I live in the world of mutter, right? Remember, that's an accomplishment. To live in the world of mutter and not in the world of asr, that's fantastic. MS is even a higher level than that. So Ramchal goes on. Great story of Safra. And the story of Safra ultimately tells us how far, right? How far this midah of MS truly goes. Ukvar amru Talmid Chacham. Subos says very interesting. Another example of MS. Ukvar amru Talmid Chacham l'shanas pediburo. Sorry. Ukvar asru Talmid Chacham l'shanas pediburo. Chutz mishlosh dvarim. Subos say Talmid Chacham has to be especially careful about going ahead and not telling the truth. Now, l'shanos diburo means not being accurate in his speech. Talmid Chacham has to be accurate. I think I moved over today. I'm out of the lines. I'm out of the lines. I live my life in these black lines for the last since the pandemic. No, before the pandemic. This is where I live. I'm sorry. I can move back.
I got it.
No, I'm sorry. Okay. Anyway, so the Ramchal quotes over here that a Talmid Chacham is not permitted to change his word, the shanos tiburo, right? To change his words. He has to live within the world of MS. Chutz mishlosh dvarim. Now there are three exceptions where Talmid Chacham is permitted to go ahead and not be totally forthcoming with the truth. So ultimately, again, the Gemara says b'mesechta. Mesechta means that he's allowed to go ahead and not be honest about the true scope and prowess of his knowledge and learning. So if someone says, do you know this particular area of halacha? He could say no. He could say no. Right? Ultimately, again, he's permitted to go ahead and change that. Bepuria, in matters of intimacy, and ultimately, again, b'ushpiza. If he stayed by someone's house and someone asked him, is your host a good host? So he's allowed to not answer that truthfully. Again, he can't say he's a bad host, but he's allowed to kind of deviate a little bit out of a concern that if the Talmid Chacham says the guy who hosted him is a good host, that guy is going to be swamped, ultimately, again, with people asking for his hospitality. Okay, the point over here is, the point over here is, a Talmid Chacham, right, himself is only allowed to veer from the truth in these very limited capacities, very limited way. One of the pillars upon which the world is situated is MS. So he says, So we'll say, if MS is one of the pillars which holds up the world, that means when someone speaks falsehood, when someone speaks sheker, what are they doing? They're literally, again, removing one of those pillars. They're going ahead and unsettling the stability of the world. Conversely, someone who goes ahead and is steeped in the midah of MS, has an absolute part in building and bolstering the world. Ukvar sipruch chacham zichron levracha me'os samakom Mesillas Yesharim be'emes shalahaya malach hamaves sholet sham. Ulefi she'ishto she'Rebbe Ploni shinsa b'dvareha af api shayla kavana tova gersa bahem malach hamaves ad she'gershua misham ba'avor zeh v'chazru l'shalvusam. So we'll say, and the Gemara Mesillas Yesharim tells a story about a city where ultimately, again, the Malach HaMavis had no control over. And the reason the Malach HaMavis had no control over it was because every single one of the residents was medactic, was exceptionally careful and meticulous to always be truthful, to always maintain the midah of MS. One time someone changed. One time someone didn't tell the truth, albeit for a good reason. Malach HaMavis came in, they chased this person out. Okay, point over here is the midah of MS is powerful. So it's always interesting to him. Ramchal says, we don't have to be marach, we don't have to get into this. Now he just says we don't have to get into this after we spent a lot of time getting into this. Ramchal says, so we'll say here the Ramchal says something very interesting. The truth is, we spoke a lot about MS and sheker, but the truth is we don't have to spend a lot of time focusing on the midah of MS. For one simple reason, it's logical. It's logical, I will say. Without MS, you can't build relationships. You can't build interpersonal relationships, and you absolutely can't build a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because if there's one thing that is at the cornerstone of every single life relationship, it's honesty. It's MS. And without it, nothing happens. That's why we understand, by the way, that the chosam, the signet of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is MS. Because what is Rebbe Shalom more than anything? He's genuine. He's genuine. Rebbe Shalom is a genuine entity. And that's his core. So if I lack that midah of MS, and I find myself steeped in one of the groups of shakranim, it undermines my entire ability to become anything in life. We'll also stop over here for today. Tomorrow we get into the interesting topic of Chil Hashem, which is a much shorter one. We shouldn't continue tomorrow. We'll say Shkoyach. Again, if anyone needs a Mesillas Yesharim, the box is up here. There's art scroll versions, there's Hebrew versions. You can take both the art scroll and the Hebrew if you'd like. There's also the pieces of paper in there are the Hachzek calendars. That tells you the order that we go in and where we're up to on each and every day. We're following the schedule. So please, again, they're complimentary. Help yourself.